This well-known gospel out of John chapter 4 is rather lengthy, as we have experienced today. I feel like I need a bottle of water. It's so lengthy that we are given some time to hear and to feel some dynamics. There are centuries worth of history between two religious cultures, the Jews and the Samaritans. In a way, the two groups were and still are quite similar. They have their father Abraham. You heard in the scriptures about Jacob and Joseph and the gift of the well. They have that common heritage. They have their Pentateuch, those first 5 books of the Old Testament. But their differences are even greater, including the most holy of their places, and we heard that in the dialogue today. She said, we have Gerizim that we worship in. Jesus says, we have Mount Zion, Jerusalem. The Samaritan Israelites, as they are referred to today, have always looked to Mount Gerizim. Now, in doing some more research this week, I discovered for the first time that the Torah, those first 5 books of the Bible, the scrolls, are actually different for these two groups of people. Now, the Samaritans resided in a region just north of Jerusalem and south of Galilee. We're going to be a map here. The sanctuary is going to be a map this morning. You're looking due north, okay? Up here is the Sea of Galilee. Can you see the storms of brewing up here? I want to cross over, Anne. Shall I walk on the water? No, you walk on the water. Have faith. This is Galilee up here. The Jordan River winds, the Jordan Creek, shall we say, winds on down to the Dead Sea. The Dead Sea is in the narthex out there. Jerusalem, Mount Zion. Carol Rothweiler, you can be Mount Zion today, okay? You are Mount Zion. You and Linda will hold the fort, okay? Samaria, let's see. Linda and Jody, you can be the women at the well. How's that? So that is how close. It's 20, 30 miles between the two. Jesus was born up here. Right up here. Up front. And again, Galilee is up here. Now, are you all feeling left out? Because you are desert. You are the Syrian desert and the Arabian desert. You are dry, speaking of dry. And you are blessed too. Now, if you walk the pathway with Jesus long enough, you know that he puts mileage in between Jerusalem and Galilee quite often. And if you read the scriptures enough, you find out that the Jews go way out of their way into the fellowship hall in order to avoid the women at the well territory, and vice versa. It wasn't just because of religious and cultural differences alone. There was a history of the Jews doing military harm to Samaria. There are portions of the United States, for instance, I think we can relate a little bit to this, where a Yankee from Pennsylvania would not be wise to go camp out in Virginia or Alabama and say, "You got a friend in Pennsylvania?" There are places in the north where Southerners do not feel comfortable either, and it has a lot to do with some nasty battles that happened in the 1860s. The Jews and the Samaritans often found themselves in the uncomfortable position of being in the same place at the same time. Did you get that parentheses in there, that they often share space together? It's like watching two households of dogs walking down Pleasure Road, down the sidewalk here, and wondering whether one dog is going to be friendly with another dog, right? I think we can relate a little bit to our current culture. I'm going to go off the path a little bit for a moment. In the United States, which is getting dangerously close to this biblical story reality, as we watch red neighbors live next to blue neighbors. It disturbs me to watch news organizations label states or cities as either red or blue. We are the United States of America. Whenever you hear the word that's a red city or a blue city, that is rhetoric. I pray that we get our act together before it's too late and start exercising love for each other, listening to and trying to understand our differences, at least caring to understand our differences, and celebrating the life that we have been given by God to live in this garden together. When leaders who write and control the narrative do this dividing for their own political gain, all that is left in the community are people who just want a drink of water. People who are starved for life itself. And all this political rhetoric about what children can wear and what children can't wear, there's a sweet child of God sitting there in the corner somewhere that is going to take their life today. Shame on us. Back to the pathway. In this dialogue between the Samaritan woman and Jesus, there are some jabs thrown in there. Have you heard those jabs? I tried to act them out a little bit. Perhaps some cultural superiority being exercised from both sides. Some things that have been learned by both groups over the centuries. The beloved disciple, John, who wrote this text, sets the scene in verse 1, reminding the reader that this particular well was given by a common ancestor to the Jews and the Samaritans. Jacob gave the well to his son, Joseph. The woman at the well implies that the well belongs to her people, and Jesus has a lot of nerve pushing his luck around that well. Jesus offers to provide water that only God could give. And then he does something that only God can do. And this is one of the signs in John that we need to be watching all along the way. The dialogue takes a big turn when Jesus tells the woman that he knows more about her than what she is revealing. Jesus is not doing this to be creepy. Jesus is not doing this to usurp authority or power over her. Jesus is showing the Samaritan woman and showing us that he is God, and that he offers living water to this world where we hoard water and sustenance and life itself from each other. We put up the barriers because of our own selfish needs to exercise that sinfulness officially known as me, 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 me. In the midst of conflict in this world, in the midst of not always knowing where we belong in this world, Jesus shows up and breaks down every wall that is built and declares that God is to be worshipped in spirit and in truth. The woman responds in a similar way that Jewish Nicodemus did in John chapter 3, the previous chapter. You're very wise. You're a prophet. I'm getting that from you. You know everything that I've ever done. You are definitely from God. And she reminds him that the Messiah is coming, and he will proclaim all things to us. Jesus, using the language that comes from the history of God with God's people, says, I am. I am. I am he. God makes good on the promises that he gave to his people Moses had asked God, by whose authority am I supposed to tell Pharaoh and the people of Israel that they are to follow me out of Egypt? God says to Moses, you tell them that I am has told you. I am the one who lovingly reached into precious atoms of this creation, held you in my hands, and blew the breath of life into you. The one who has known you from before time. The one who has watched you take every step in your life, in the purpose-driven moments in your life, and in the wandering moments in your life. In those moments when you needed to learn how to walk again. I am is here. When Jesus said, I am he, there was another large turn in the dialogue, in this famous story, and in the life of her and her community. If you're spinning in circles today, wondering where in the world you fit in this world, perhaps you are in that corner. If you do not believe that you could ever have enough worth in God's creation, Jesus is here to sit with you today and share abundant life with you. He created the water we sit around and sip. He gave that gift of that well that people are arguing over. And he digs. He gave the ability to dig for wells. He sustains the water that humanity neglects and abuses. God moves over the waters and turns the impossible into possible. I pray that you take note of that today in this sacred moment, in the sacred ground that God has given us to share. I pray that we worship God in spirit and in truth in that sacred reality.